tonight is Ernani Cecon. Ernani leads the architecture practice at Questrade, who are continuously working on its digital transformation initiative. Ernani tonight will be talking us through a test case for microservices and events, specifically in trading. Welcome, Ernani.
Most important question. No, okay, the second most important question of the night. My name is Ernani. As Questrade said, I lead the architecture practice at Questrade. Questrade is an online brokerage, as some people might be aware. I have a lot of fun there, as you guys are going to see in a second. I have some experience with large digital transformation initiatives. That's actually one passion of mine. I do architecture as a profession, but one of the things I like most about architecture is actually the human side of tech that Vlad was talking about in the beginning, which is changing the mindset, changing the way we work. Microservices is one aspect of it, but there's a whole lot of other slew of things that we need to consider during a transformation initiative, right? So in architecture specifically, my passion is API strategy. I would love if in Toronto we had actually an API meetup. It doesn't exist yet. It's interesting, every major city in Europe there is one. In North America it's not that common. It would be lovely to talk about that. Actually, this group most likely could benefit from this because good API strategies are about, as this latest presentation was discussing, simplify frontends, right? You don't want thick applications. You don't want to write too much code to run on the device. You want thin, simpler applications, and typically good APIs leverage that. That's why this is my passion. And of course, microservices. Usually I have to explain my name on average 2 to 3 times per person how to pronounce it correctly. Not that I care that much. I don't mind, so don't worry. And music is my passion for non-business hours. So before I proceed, part of this presentation, one of the goals is to catch interest. I love working in this type of business that Questrade does. It's a lot of fun. I'm not sure how many people here trade, stocks and options, I mean. But being behind a trading platform is a quite interesting challenge. And of course, I have a diagram, but let me first say sorry. This is not, of course, a true scale or a true representation of a trading system. There is more to it. But for the sake of keeping this, and I'll try to promise, to a 10-minute chat, I simplified to what's most important for us to consider right now. Okay? So I'm not going to label everything because it doesn't matter much, but consider a trading system, an application, a platform that you can use to place trades, to watch the market, or whatever you want to do with it. Involves customers in one side, right, and data on the other side. I want to use, for the example of this evening, the data side of things. But as you can see, this is a type of system where things can get really complicated because pressure can come from anywhere. It can come from that side because the market is going nuts. Maybe the customers are not necessarily logging in, right? Or maybe not much is happening, but people decided to log in because they want to download their tax slips. It's tax season, right? So you have to be able to react to these things appropriately. In a digital transformation strategy where you are trying to modernize your platform, modernize your infrastructure, you have to consider your options, right? You might want to move away from a typical fixed on-prem infrastructure and move to the cloud, so you get flexible infrastructure, right? If the market goes nuts, maybe this side of the application, you can make it auto-scalable. If the clients go nuts, you can also have this side of the application go scalable. Anyways, I'm going to go through an example to make it a little bit more clear. And warning, because I'm really going to try to keep my promise and keep this short, this presentation is pretty much opening a can of worms, and I'm not going to close it, right? I hope that we can chat later after the 10-minute timeline. Wrong button. Okay, so in trading, typical landscape, okay? On that side, when I was showing market data, typical influx, if not much is happening on the market, that never happens, right? But if not much is happening, we're talking about 1.5 gigabits per second of data influx that you have to handle. has to be processed, that has to be massaged, prepared, added value, and each company does it differently. Questrade has its own way. But it has to be distributed with minimal latency because data is not only for customers to see, right? There are several other things to consider. You have to monitor risk. You have to see if people are on margin calls. Like there's so many things, internal and external and regulatory process that have to be taken care of. Some of them require very, very, very minimal latency. If there is a synthetic order to be processed, for example, if someone placed a condition and say, I want this order to go to the market and it reaches this price, you have to make sure it gets processed super quick so the customer doesn't lose money. On the other hand, if it's for the human eye to see the price changing, yeah, you have a little bit more leeway there because the human eye can't capture latencies like well below, what, 150 milliseconds, 200, 150 if you're super fast. Here's a challenge. Multicasting is a network strategy that is typically used anywhere you talk about brokerages, market data, NYSE, NASDAQ, whatever, okay? What that means is it makes it a challenge for cloud. Most people end up going to a data center because that's where you can get that. On the cloud providers, at least major ones, they don't support multicast by default. So you have to go and be a little bit more creative on how you handle this. Here's an example why it's challenging. This was 2 weeks ago on Thursday. Nothing was happening on the market. Prices were like, yeah, sure, a little bit of variation, low volume. And then a market event happens, okay? This was actually an actual market event that happened 2 weeks ago on Thursday. US lifting a tariff from China. And as that was developing on CNBC, this happened, right? Prices went apeshit, look at the volumes, what happened, and the platform needs to handle it, right? We take really good care of this. We don't want to transform the way we do things if the new way of doing things doesn't handle this. And that's the challenge we're trying to deal with. And just as a factoid, interesting one, we care about this so much that in January last year, when everyone wanted to trade Weave.io, why? I don't know, right? But let's say everyone wanted to do that. A lot of the Canadian big banks on the brokers, they were down. We were not, right? We have to provision for that. We have to take care of this to make sure it doesn't happen. So to explain again, both sides of the system. The market data side doesn't necessarily relate to customer load, but we need to be able to scale there. If we're not able to scale there, that means we have to provision that infrastructure all the time, right? Maybe 3, 4 times the average load, the 1.5 gig. So it doesn't happen to us what happened to some of the banks back in January last year, okay? I already discussed about the multicasting being a challenge for cloud. So let me give an example, okay? So we go back to microservices and events, a topic I like a lot. Lower risk of issues and time to market. I'm not explaining here on purpose, but these are actually business drivers, okay? We have many business drivers. Flexible infrastructure is a business driver too, but let me focus on these two for a second, okay? So we don't want to be down when Weave.io happens. However, I don't want a thick monolithic platform that doesn't allow me to change as often as the customers, this side of the chain, need, so I can improve the experience. So how can microservices and events help? I want to take an example, real-time balances. Okay, financial institution, every financial institution has to handle that. I work for banks too, in banks, that's a real problem. It's actually a hard problem to solve. In trading, I find that actually a little bit more interesting because what can change your balance, right, on your bank account, on a deposit account? Debit, credit, sure. Now let's look at the market, right? Of course, cash on your account also changes your balance, but if you hold a position, if you have Apple or if you have Weave.io or whatever, every price change as often and as frequently as someone is trading on the market will affect your balance. And there are several other things that compose a balance, but how do you make that real time? Keeping those two things at the top in mind. So let's try to work through an example. Here's what a balances engine look like in a simplistic manner, but primarily there are two types of tests that run. I have to calculate the balances as often as my processing power allow me to do so. So multiple times per second for all accounts, right? High number. Let's not talk about numbers, but it's a high number. Just take that. It doesn't matter if user load, how the user load is affecting the system actually doesn't matter. And other engines need this data. As I said, there is risk, there is back office, there's a lot of other things other than providing the data to the customer that I also need to handle, right? And they have different latency priorities. And I have to service requests. Every time a system needs the balance, they will ask me, and I have to provide that information, okay, in a timely fashion. So if they've been done together, okay, on the typical monolithic system, the API call is only made for connected users. Typically 1 second of refresh is acceptable. Are you looking at the data? Every 1 second you see the new balance, it's fine. So here's a good concern. We were talking about microservices strategy and slicing monoliths. Here's a good concern that we could separate that side of things, right? Why is that interesting? Because it's used by front ends, it's a higher likelihood of the API needing change, right? And if I want a lower risk of issues, the business wants that, I want to reduce my risk of making a mistake, making a deployment mistake, crashing something, right? Also, user load, too much load on that API could make a risk of this process caching if we didn't size the infrastructure properly. But what I think is most important, I told you guys I'm passionate about API strategy. It's a business concept, and it crosses multiple domains. I'm only talking about trading here, but how about everything else, right? There's also a business line there for Forex. It's a different platform, right? Am I going to solve the balance only for trading? No, I want to solve it for Forex. I want to solve it for other business lines. Maybe there's a business line that only updates the balance once per day, but I'm still interested in that, in seeing that globally, right? The customer wants to see my overall position on trading, on Forex, on everything, on wealth management, right? So it's useful to be as a separate domain. So I picked that, okay? Interestingly enough, this is not fully fictitious. Fictitious from a diagramming perspective because I'm trying to make things more productive for the presentation. But this is actually a problem we're trying to solve right now. And if you're interested, let's chat. We're always hiring, right? Again, I'm not sure if that's allowed, sorry. We need to talk. But, okay, so here's one way to solve the problem. We slice it. We have a separate domain. So we have a microservice, right? I'm just throwing a cache there. Maybe that's on the cloud. And here is the simplistic version of that system that I showed in the beginning. So let's make that system expose somehow the balance for me. I'll separate the concern. Does this give us any benefit, right? Let's think about the business, right? I'm not a big fan of doing technology just for the sake of technology. Let me try to justify and see if I can sell something like this to the business. Well, I can sell that I have cross business lines here. I have a benefit. I have a single view now. And I can concentrate the changes about balances information on that view. That's a benefit. I also have a cache, so technically I could use my cache to reduce the load on this system, lower likelihood of issues. However, cache only for certain use cases will be good, right? If a lot of different users who didn't log in today decide to log in not at the same time because of that US-China tariff thing, I'm still going to hit the system a lot. There's a high likelihood of failure. Okay. Again, I'm happy to discuss more pros and cons of this approach at the end when we go for the Q&A. But that's a start. I have a separation. Now, are there more benefits here, right? Let's think about this for a second. Now I have the same 3 business lines systems there, and now I have a bus. So that bus is an event bus, right? Hopefully only interesting things, right, happen on the event bus. I call those events, right? Uninteresting events, I'm not sure anyone is going to want to design them and put them on the bus, but balance changes are interesting events, okay? So now, there's a little bit more separation of concerns here, if you think about it, right? So this system now can only tell the event bus when the balance changes. Instead of taking load, now they have predictable load. You may argue, well, wait a minute, now it's more load, because you said in the beginning that the API calls only happened per connected user, right? Now the user might not be connected, you're still sending a lot of data there. Sure, I'll take that. It's a con, and I'm telling you guys, we're still thinking about this, right? But this is highly valuable information though. And because it's predictable, I can probably prepare this for that, right? Plus, publishing events is typically fire and forget. So it's lightweight and asynchronous by nature, so we can probably handle this. And making the same type of change in other systems is not that complicated. It's probably as complicated as exposing an API, so why not, if we need to make a change anyways. And for systems that don't look like complex systems at all, like for example, a simple database that gets a balance update once per day for a business line that doesn't have a lot of activity going on there, I can just put a change data capture mechanism, which is a common pattern for transferring data. to publish all the data to the event bus. And now my life is easier on the microservice world, because I can still provide the data via an API there to the apps. I have an updater process that runs separately, and that updater is the one that subscribes to the event bus and is aware of every change that happens, no matter how often they come. This guy's going to send a lot of changes, right? This guy is going to send changes maybe once a day. But no matter what, I can auto-scale that separately, right? If I'm running on Kubernetes, I know how to do that. I'll keep the cache updated, and that guy can auto-scale separately, only based on number of connected users. So a little bit more benefits on this side. I have still the same benefits from the previous slide, but the point I wanted to make, and just to close this, okay, because I forgot to check the timing to see if I'm really under 10 minutes. Maybe I lied to you guys at the beginning, but it's really only one more slide. But to prove my point on flexibility, right? Here's what I can do too, right? Of course, things are getting more complicated. I'm not afraid of complicated things. I actually think microservices are okay to do complicated things if you separate concerns appropriately, right? The system itself is going to look complicated. But when you look at each domain separately, it's digestible, right? So look at what the event bus allowed me to do now, right? So let's say if I figure out by learning, right, that having the trading system publish all the balances in one shot all the time was too heavy, and I'm not getting value up there on the cloud or where that microservice is, I can have it publish only the interesting ones, or actually change the rate, okay? Because I can connect my authentication system to this bus now, this infrastructure available to me, and I can say every time someone logs in, publish it here, right? And then I'll have a updater here, another microservice on this side that subscribes to that and say, okay, that's an interesting event. If someone logged in, I want to keep a cache on my side of people who are logged in. And then this guy now can make a decision, instead of sending everything, okay, every second, it's going to send all the balances every second, only for people who are logged in. If you're not, I'll send every 15 minutes. Significantly less load on this side of the system, saving infrastructure, business likes that, right? And I still get value on my transformation layer at the top. Again, this was supposed to be just a taste of one of the types of problems that we address in trading systems. There's a lot more, and I hope we can chat more at the end. If I recall correctly, this was the last thing. So thank you very much.